Also, setting yourself up for like the sensory experience of your hyperfocus. Make sure that, maybe if you like music, there's some nice music on. Maybe get a nice smell going, light a candle or some incense or something. Like really get yourself into a space where it's very comfortable and all of your urgent physical needs are met so that your brain can just focus on this one thing that you're working on. Hey there, sunshine, and welcome back to another episode of the Neurodivergent Creative Podcast. I keep endeavoring to like put on real clothes and maybe do my makeup or something, but I just wear tank tops. So if you're on YouTube and you're like, why doesn't this person like ever change their outfit? It's because I don't like clothes that touch my neck too much. And so I tend to wear tank tops. And when I do wear a t-shirt, it's like I cut the neck out of it because when stuff touches my neck, I hate that. And we love a neurodivergent accommodation around here. So I recommend cutting the tags and collars out of your shirts if you don't like how that feels. Pro tip. So today I would love to talk about deliberately harnessing your hyperfocus to be more creative. So we all know hyperfocus, right, is the thing that happens when we get so engrossed in a project or a topic or following Wikipedia articles to the death of the universe that we can even like forget to check in with our bodies. So when I end up hyperfocusing, I do this a lot with work. Like if I'm working on a new program or something and I want to make the little web page for it and I want to make some graphics to put out on Instagram. And so I'm just in this little mode where I'm just thinking about this one thing. And I love it because I can get a lot done. I like to do things in themes. So it would be very ideal for me if like every Monday, I just worked on marketing content, like marketing content Monday. And then maybe I have coaching sessions on Tuesday and then novel day on Wednesday, which is kind of what I have stumbled into creating, but it could use a little bit more refinement so that I can use my hyperfocus to my advantage. The benefits of hyperfocusing, or at least allowing yourself to stack similar tasks or projects together from like a work and productivity standpoint, that's great because switching and multitasking decreases productivity by a lot, by like a huge percent. And I used to know that percent, but I don't anymore. But I do know that it is large. And I assume that my podcast producer will find a statistic and put it roughly in this area on my YouTube. So another note for the people who are just listening to the audio version, you're missing out on my adorable face and cute pop-ups. So check me out on YouTube. Hooray. And if you're already here on YouTube, there's a huge backlog of episodes from before I had a YouTube available on audio only. So if you love and you are picking up what I'm putting down, go follow me from the beginning and binge some content while you're wrapping your Christmas gifts this year. So anyway, though, back to the hyperfocusing thing. It's great because it reduces multitasking, but we also do need to take regular breaks from the hyperfocusing to make sure that we are eating and drinking water and going to the bathroom and taking stretch breaks and eye breaks. Because when you stare at a screen all day, your eyes, they desire rest. And often, if you're anything like me, when I stop looking at my computer, I'm like, oh, let me just look at my phone. Let me go from the big rectangle to the small rectangle. This is not the best. I actually used to work at a place and one of our coworkers was in charge of like the eye break timer. We had this little program on our computers and every 20 minutes, it told us to take a 60-second eye break. And that's very easy to just snooze, right? It's like any other reminder on your phone. But she would actually make us like stand up and look away from our computers. Sometimes we would go take a walk. Sometimes we would go out for lunch, which ensured that we actually left the building and breathed some fresh air. And I really liked that. I liked that little break timer thing. I know that it was intended for eyeballs, but it benefited a lot of other things too. But the key to it was having the other person there to keep us accountable. One person to say, okay, everybody, we are all going to stand up and we're all going to look away from our screens for 60 seconds. So small, but it's so small that it feels inconsequential, except for the fact that it's definitely not. So let's talk about hyperfocusing. To actually like structure yourself a nice little hyperfocusy period of time. This could be for working tasks, chores around the house, or creativity. I would love if we were all carving out 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours at a time to just do creative stuff and see where that impulse takes us. But in order to do that, we need to set up some structure. And so, because autistic people especially, but neurodivergent folks in general, benefit from a script. So I'm going to give you a script for how to create and structure your intentional hyperfocus. So step 1 is that you have to get a cup of water. Like I have a large 24-ounce cup with a lid and a straw. I drink 3 of those a day. Get yourself some water. Make sure that you eat before your hyperfocus session begins. Or if you are not hungry when it starts, specifically pack yourself a snack or a lunch to have with you, literally. I want you to bring your bodily needs with you into the hyperfocusing session. And obviously go to the bathroom before you start, because what we don't want to do is like have to take 14 pee breaks where you're having like an emergency. Your 1 cup of water should get you to like 1 or 2 peas. There shouldn't be any surprises with it. So you also want to minimize distractions. So for me, this would be like my dog. My dog needs a walk at roughly like lunchtime. So let's say I wanted to hyperfocus in the morning on whatever I'm going to do. Let's say I'm going to work on recording podcast episodes. So all I'm going to do for 4 hours is record podcast episodes. I probably don't need that much time, but whatever. That gives me time to go like research stuff and get some notes together if I want to get some notes together and look up sources that I want to make sure I put in the show notes. Like whatever. I've got 4 hours on the clock just to dick around with my podcast. Cool. When does my dog need to go out? Is that going to be a distraction for me? Am I going to be really frustrated at having to stop the flow that I'm in to take care of her needs? So if I'm setting this up for myself, I might also walk the dog before the hyperfocus starts to eliminate that potential distraction or potential interruption. You might also want to tell the people in your house or in your workspace, if you're doing this at work, like I am blocking off 4 hours on my calendar to work on something specific. Please don't interrupt me. And that ask, that request, that boundary might look different for different scenarios. If you have children, you will probably need to be like very clear. Knock on my door only if someone is injured. Knock on my door only if a stranger is trying to jump through our windows. Because kids tend to go to the primary parent, the default parent, which usually tends to be mom. So put your spouse or partner on kid duty and be like, I am having a moment for me. Take the kids out, take them somewhere. Remind them that you are here and you exist, and that if they need a snack, they can talk to you and not me. However, that conversation needs to look if you have children. And also, I don't have children, so I'm going to stumble into some naive spaces where I am not informed enough to know how things go when you are parenting children. But I feel like that's kind of it. Like don't come in here unless you're bleeding is one. But, also then perhaps schedule some time to reconnect with the kids afterward and be like, I wasn't ignoring you. I was just making sure that I had time to do my stuff. And coming at it from a place of like modeling for your children what that kind of self-care looks like. I have time for myself. Sometimes you have time for yourself and your hobbies, and you don't like to be interrupted by your siblings when you're working on your hobby. I'm the same way. So just making sure that it's age appropriate when you're setting these boundaries, and that your kids understand that you're not mad at them, you're not ignoring them, you're not upset with them, etc. You know how to parent your kids. I don't have to tell you. mostly because I don't have the experience to do so. Also, if you work from home, like for me, we don't have kids, we have a dog, and all I would need to do is to tell my partner, like, hey, between time A and time B, I'm recording podcast episodes, so please don't interrupt me. Okay. And then if he forgot and he happened to open the door and he noticed me recording, he would then back out of the room like Homer Simpson backing into the bushes. It's very handy. It's very respectful. If you are at work, this is a little bit more difficult because somebody might try to schedule a meeting with you or something and they don't check your calendar first. That was a big thing for me. It's like, you guys want me to put stuff on my calendar and yet you don't really check my availability when you schedule a meeting. And yeah, so it's rough. It's rough out there in corporate life. They don't always respect your boundaries. So if you are in a work environment, I would try to limit a hyper-focusing type session like this to maybe a couple hours, like 2 to 3 max. You're not really going to be able to carve out more time than that without management getting a little frustrated. And that's on masking. That's how to mask your need to hyperfocus at work, is to try and minimize it. Or even trying to like go somewhere else that is not your regular space at work. If you have multiple neurodivergent coworkers or just coworkers who also want some structured time to work uninterrupted, you could maybe put together a co-working session or like a brainstorm session and go grab a conference room or something if your workplace has that available to you. That way, to management or whomever, this is going to look like, oh, a very productive meeting, blah, 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 it's happening. Meanwhile, you are all individually just hyper-focusing on things that you need to get done while people leave you alone. And I love that for you. Okay. We also want to like have an intention set at the beginning. So if you're like, oh, I'm definitely going to hyper focus. Okay, what are you going to hyper focus on? It's very easy to do when it's a video game or a book or something that's like fun. Creativity, similar if you have everything you need in one place. So for me, let's say I wanted to do a collage and my magazines were in a different room and my scissors were somewhere else because I've been wrapping Christmas gifts, and like just all the supplies that I need are everywhere. That's not going to be a very effective hyper-focusing session because I'm going to have to keep leaving my curated little space to go get the things that I need. So you want to make sure also that you have all of the supplies that you need. It's like you're going to a desert island, but the desert island is in your house, but you are bringing food and water and you're making sure that you go potty first and that your dog went potty first and that people know not to bother you. And also you have all the supplies that you need. You with me? Love it. We're doing it. We're using hyperfocus. We are hacking the hyperfocus. And if it doesn't come naturally to you to just be like, okay, I'm going to work on painting, maybe put on some nice ambient music or even watch some YouTube videos or some reels or something from an account that you follow that does art. So like, for instance, say I want to hyperfocus and practice making some watercolors to use as gifts or something, or to sell, or just to practice. Like, you don't have to have a real reason other than like, I just wanted to do this thing. So let's say I want to hyperfocus on making watercolor paintings. I might put on some YouTube content of people doing watercolor paintings so that even if I get distracted from like what I'm doing, I can kind of watch and then remember, oh yeah, I want to do that. Now I also need to remember to have my water and like some rinsey water and some paper towels and all my paints, the supplies. It could be kind of handy. I know that we talked about this in the hobby hibernation episode, to sort of pack all of the supplies together in a box or a bin or a bag. And in the hobby hibernation episode, I suggested doing this without labeling it so that you can just kind of grab a surprise package and work on that hobby. But if you do not like surprises and that idea did not appeal to you, you could also put together some bins or kits or whatever and label them. So this is everything I need to crochet whatever. This is everything I need to make macrame plant hangers. This is everything I need to do watercolor painting. And then you already have the supplies that you need. And then all you got to do is just vibe and enjoy yourself. Doesn't that sound lovely? Okay, so that's pretty much it. Those are pretty much my tips. I would love to hear from you. Do you sort of use hyperfocus to your own advantage? Have you figured out what tends to make you go into a hyperfocusing mode? It's like for me, art, sometimes no, like sometimes I really do just do something for maybe an hour or so. And then I'm like, okay, I'm kind of done with this. And then I move on to something else. But if I am writing and I'm really in the flow with it, I think that's the difference, is if it feels like it's hard and difficult and I'm not all the way engaged with it. Like, for instance, my novel days in November were not the most productive that I have worked on my novel in the past 2 years. Last year in November, I actually finished my first draft of my manuscript and came in at like 104,000 words total. Not just in November, but I used the NaNoWriMo November energy to really motivate myself to get it finished. And this year, my goal is to finish one character's point of view. Like, I wrote just her whole POV start to finish without doing like the other character POVs that will be in the final book. But I'm just focusing on one character at a time, which has been very interesting for me. And I was really blocked on how to resolve something in a way that made sense and kept the integrity of like other pieces that I know I want in the story. So every time I sat down to write, I would write a little bit and then I just would hit this point where I'm like, I'm still not sure where I'm going with this. And so I was getting very distracted. I was not hyper-focusing at all. And then finally I worked through that, and now I have a direction that I'm going. And I actually did, over this past weekend, I had a co-working session with some of my working title, I was going to say students, but mentees, maybe my working title clients, members, those people whose books I am helping them to stay focused on and write. And like 4 of us got together and did a co-working writing session. And I was super on a roll and kept working even after everybody else had to leave. So I like finally worked through that and was able to get to that like, yes, awesome hyper-focus mode. And I love that for me because it means like I'm actually going to hit my November goal for my novel. So what are your hyper-focus patterns that you've already recognized? So take a look at those. Notice, what do I tend to hyper-focus on the most? Is it work stuff? Is it creative stuff? Is it playful stuff? Assess, figure out what my nail polish came off on this one nail. It was like chipping and then I picked at it and it looks really weird. That's fine. There's a little Easter egg for YouTube. Weird fingernails. Okay. So check in. Where do you already hyper-focus the most? Do you want to lean into that, or do you want to try and get into a hyper-focus mode so that you can focus on something else, such as creativity or fun or whatever? Also, setting yourself up for like the sensory experience of your hyper-focus. Make sure that, maybe if you like music, there's some nice music on. Maybe get a nice smell going, light a candle or some incense or something. Like really get yourself into a space where it's very comfortable and all of your urgent physical needs are met so that your brain can just focus on this one thing that you're working on. And then also setting up those boundaries with the people around you so that they know not to interrupt and you know that you won't be interrupted. Because that's the worst for me when I'm like really in the groove with something, but I can hear like somebody walking down the hall and I'm like, well, if somebody's going to like come in here and interrupt me, I'm going to stop what I'm doing so that I can pay attention to that. Knowing that there's not going to be an interruption is good for both you as the person doing a hyperfocus and everybody else as the people who don't want to interrupt you while you're doing that because they don't want to upset you. Just trust that they don't want to upset you and that you're not being a weirdo by asking for this. Let's normalize asking for some time for you to go down a fucking rabbit hole because it makes you happy. Okay? Okay. Love you. You're doing great. Drink some water. Oh, I'm only like halfway done with this one. Hooray. Stay hydrated. Live your best life.